August 13th, 2018, 5:27 a.m. Frederick, Colorado. Chris Watts kisses his wife goodbye. He tells her he loves her, then he loads her body into his truck. That's not a plot twist. That's not speculation. That is what happened. Inside a quiet suburban home on Saratoga Trail, in a neighborhood where people mowed their lawns on weekends and waved to each other from driveways. And the most disturbing part of this story isn't what Chris Watts did, it's how invisible he was. While doing it, they looked perfect. Chris and Shanann had been together for 7 years, 2 daughters. Bella, 4 years old. Celeste, 3. Shanann was 15 weeks pregnant. With their son, they had already chosen a name, Nico. Shanann was the kind of person who made everyone around her feel seen. She posted videos of her family. On Facebook, Bella and Celeste dancing in the kitchen, birthday parties, Chris smiling. In the background, from the outside, it looked like the life people spend years trying to build. From the inside, Chris Watts had already decided to destroy it. That summer, Chris had begun an affair with a co-worker named Nicole Kessinger. He later described it as something that made him feel alive. In a way he couldn't explain, he was planning to leave Shanann. He wanted a new life, and he had decided that the fastest way to get it was to make his old one disappear. Not leave, disappear. Shanann returned home from a business trip at 1:48 a.m. On August 13th, a friend named Nicole dropped her off at the door. Chris was awake. He later told investigators that he woke Shanann up, wanting to talk about their marriage, about leaving, about the affair. What happened in the next few hours in that house, in the dark, while Bella and Celeste slept down the hall, is something only Chris Watts fully knows. By 5:27 a.m., his truck was loaded. By the time Frederick was waking up, Shanann was gone. Bella was gone. Celeste was gone. And Chris Watts was driving to work. At 1:40 p.m., Nicole Atkinson arrived at the Watts home to check on Shanann. She had been trying to reach her all day. Shanann's car was in the garage. Her shoes were by the door. Her phone was inside. Her wedding ring was on the nightstand. Shanann Watts did not go anywhere voluntarily. Nicole called 911. Police arrived at the house, and Chris Watts, who had spent the morning burying his wife in a shallow grave at an oil field owned by his company, came home to talk to them. He cried on camera. He held up photos of his daughters. He begged for his family to come home. That press appearance became one of the most analyzed moments in true crime history, not because of what he said, because of what investigators noticed. He never said their names. He described his own family the way you would describe people you had just met. CBI agent Tammy Lee watched that interview and said later that she knew immediately. She knew. 2 days after the disappearance, investigators brought Chris in for questioning. He sat across from detectives. 4 hours. He maintained the story. He passed no polygraph. He claimed he had no idea where his family was. Then investigators made a decision that changed everything. They brought his father into the room. Ronnie Watts sat down across from his son and the investigators. left them alone. What happened next was recorded. On hidden cameras, Chris Watts, the man who had spent 2 days maintaining his innocence, looked at his father and began to talk. He told his father that Shanann had strangled Bella and Celeste. That morning, that he had witnessed it, that he had killed Shanann in a rage because of what she had done. To their daughters, they were blue. He told his father she choked both of them to death. His father asked him one question. She choked both of them. And Chris Watts said, I freaked out and did the same thing to her. That was his first version of the truth. It was a lie. Evidence later proved that Bella and Celeste were still alive when Shanann died, which meant Chris Watts killed his wife first, then drove to the oil field with his daughters. Still breathing, in the back of his truck, Bella was 4 years old. According to the prison confession, Bella asked him a question. Before she died, she looked at her father and asked, "Daddy, are you going to do the same thing to me that you did to Cease?" He said yes. Shanann was found, buried in a shallow grave at the Anadarko oil field. Bella and Celeste were found inside 2 separate oil tanks. Their unborn brother Nico was never given a chance. On November 6, 2018, Chris Watts pleaded guilty to all charges, 5 consecutive life sentences. Without the possibility of parole, he will die in prison. But here is the part of this story that nobody talks about enough. Chris Watts was not a monster in the way people imagine monsters. He coached his daughters' soccer games. He posted smiling photos. On social media, he waved to his neighbors. He was the kind of man nobody worried about. And that is the most terrifying thing about this case, not the crime itself, but the face he wore every single day before it happened. Because monsters are supposed to be recognizable, Chris Watts wasn't. He looked exactly like everyone else. He drove to work every morning. He smiled in photographs, and for years, nobody saw anything at all. Stop for a second before you scroll, not to like this video. Just answer this in the comments. Was there a moment in this case, one detail, that made you realize the version of Chris Watts that his neighbors knew was never real? Because that question is what stays with me, not what he did, but how long he did it, without anyone knowing. Subscribe to Rulik Enigmas and turn on the bell. Here on Rulik Enigmas, we don't just cover the crime, we try to understand what was hiding underneath it. Shanann deserved better, Bella deserved better, Celeste deserved better, and Nico, who never got a single day, deserved better than all of it. Say their names.